Welcome back to another FPL Wildcard video and podcast. This time, out of Game Week 30, we've got that international break and plenty of time to mull things over. Those that didn't free hit in Game Week 29, some of you might be considering wildcarding right now in Game Week 30, and within the next week or so, we should get clarification on the future double game weeks, and that would make a wildcard in Game Week 30 very appealing to say the least. I'll build the best 50-man squad and talk about the current projections according to FPL Team and Planet FPL alongside Ben Krellin, and of course, some things are subject to change and not everything is going to be set in stone, but they provide a good idea on what doubles to expect in Game Week 34 and 37, and also some small double game weeks in either 35 or 36. Be sure to drop a like on YouTube. Let's get this over 200 likes overall and keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Amazon Music and give a follow on those platforms too. The links will be in the description and also in the pinned comment. And you can also check out my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, for the latest FPL and UCL fantasy updates, the FPL League, Drafthound, and the Discord server. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. The projections on screen are according to Planet FPL, and you can see them on FPL.team, the website. Be sure to check it out. And in Game Week 34, they expect Bournemouth to face Aston Villa away and Wolves away, and also for Wolves to have a double of Arsenal at home and Bournemouth at home. So currently only two teams set to double in 34 according to Planet FPL, but they do admit that there are other teams that could double in Game Week 34, which include Arsenal, Bournemouth of course, which I just mentioned, Crystal Palace, Everton, Liverpool, Sheffield United and Wolves. And actually we did get some news from a reliable Everton source that indicated that Everton's rearranged Merseyside derby against Liverpool is now being discussed with a penciled-in date on the week commencing the 22nd of April. What that would mean is Liverpool and Everton doubling in Game Week 34. So that also would add some credence to Ben Krellin's projections for Game Week 34. But looking at what Planet FPL are also suggesting, in Game Week 35, we could have doubles for Brighton and Chelsea. Then we could have two more doublers in Game Week 37 with Sheffield United facing Everton and Manchester United away from home. And finally Tottenham Hotspur with two home fixtures against Burnley and Manchester City. Be sure to check out Planet FPL and their projections on the website fpl.team. Very useful resources to say the least. And the same goes for the ever reliable Ben Krellin, who is actually predicting the following teams to have a very good chance of doubling in Game Week 34. Arsenal and Chelsea, a 70% chance according to Ben Krellin. The same goes for Bournemouth versus Wolves, and also Crystal Palace versus Newcastle, Everton versus Liverpool, and Manchester United versus Sheffield United. But there's a few things to look out for, and that's why Ben Krellin provides several of these very reliable and very useful projections and graphs. So for Game Week 34, it's also worth bearing in mind that Brighton versus Manchester City is 70% likely to blank. So Brighton might end up having no fixture whatsoever in Game Week 34, and that's something else worth considering. But as you can see there, the likely double game weeks, just so you can see it very clearly: Arsenal facing Wolves away and Chelsea at home, Bournemouth facing Aston Villa away and Wolves away. Then you've got Chelsea, who have a single game week against an unknown opponent, so either Arsenal away or Tottenham at home. You've got Crystal Palace with another double with West Ham and Newcastle at home, Everton with two home fixtures against Nottingham Forest and Liverpool having two away fixtures in Fulham and Everton. And then we've got two more doublers in terms of Sheffield United facing Burnley at home and Manchester United away, and Wolves facing Arsenal and Bournemouth at home. And the other single game weeks against unknown opponents would include Tottenham or Brighton for Manchester City. Both of them would be away fixtures if one of them were to fall under Game Week 34. Man United would face either Sheffield United at home or Newcastle at home. Then you've got Newcastle facing Crystal Palace away or Manchester United at home, and that's pretty much it. There's so much, of course, that could yet happen, and we will find out more over the next week or so. Even by the end of this week, we could have confirmation of the doubles in Game Week 34, and as a result, which other ones will fall under Game Week 37. Let's now head over to the best wildcard team and also take some of this into account when building that wildcard squad. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. My overall squad value is 105.2 million, but the vast majority of you will be easily able to afford the 50-man squad I'm going to delve into, and you can make some downgrades as we go along, and I'll discuss some alternatives in each position. But let's start off with the goalkeepers, which is the least important, but you want to have kind of set and forget options from now until the end of the season. Neto was quite underwhelming in double game week 28, but he has good fixtures until game week 32, and both Ben Crellin and Planet FPL project Bournemouth to double in Game Week 34, and that means the likes of Neto or any Bournemouth defender could still offer pretty good value, and I would recommend at least considering one of them in your FPL team. Now, with Everton set to double in Game Week 34, now one of those fixtures could be Liverpool, but having said that, Pickford could be another great alternative in the goalkeeper position, and I do like David Raya, but some of the fixtures for Arsenal are quite tough, especially when you compare them to Liverpool and Manchester City's run-in, and Arsenal are probably likely to double in Game Week 37 and not Game Week 34, at least that's according to Planet FPL, and let's see how it all turns out. But then again, Ben Crellin does project Arsenal to double against Wolves away and Chelsea at home in Game Week 34. There's a 70% chance according to him, so I think in terms of your main goalkeeper option is between Neto, Raya and also Pickford. But another goalkeeper we can consider is Petrovic, because Chelsea are set to have two doubles from now until the end of the season. One of them could happen in Game Week 35 or 36, and the other one could even happen as soon as Game Week 37. So there's a lot to consider there, of course, and I think one of those four goalkeepers is absolutely fine, and the same goes for Alphonse Areola, who's one of the best goalkeepers this season in FPL. But let me know, would you disagree? I think once the fixtures come out and we have a clear idea of when the doubles are going to fall under, this could actually change quite drastically in the update wildcard video next week, so be sure to check that out as well. But for the time being, I'm going for Neto and Areola as two budget options in this position. I would certainly go for one defensive coverage from Chelsea because of the doubles that they're going to get later in the season, and they've got a great fixture run for the next couple of weeks, and Malo Gusto is my favourite Chelsea option besides the obvious Cole Palmer in the heart of the midfield. Now, I did mention Petrovic in the goalkeeper position. You can also go for him. I don't even mind that double up potentially for the long term, but it is worth noting that Reece James could be back after the international break, and that could spell trouble for Malo Gusto, who won the Player of the Match award in the FA Cup against Leicester, and I think he's a bonus points machine. If he ever gets an assist in a Premier League game or he gets a clean sheet, he's got a great chance of getting those bonus points as well. But my second defender is going to be someone who doesn't double for the time being. He could do in Game Week 34, and his fixture in Game Week 30 doesn't look particularly great, but I'd still recommend Gabriel or Saliba, and my current preference is with the Brazilian, who was withdrawn from the Brazil squad due to injury. I think he sustained a foot problem against Porto, but I wouldn't be too concerned. It might be one of these typical international break injuries to prevent these players from aggravating anything, and also just to focus on their clubs. And the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool and Manchester City are all doing it. It's not uncommon practice, and it's quite typical really from these clubs. So the third defender I'm going to go for is someone from Liverpool. He offers tremendous value at this moment in time, and that's going to be Bradley. Now, once again, like I said with Gusto, you could also compensate and go for the goalkeeper in Kelleher this time out, but Alisson could be back by April, but then you could also say the same thing about Bradley, and Trent could return even sooner than Alisson, so that could spell trouble for Bradley, who was benched in the FA Cup for Joe Gomez. That was quite surprising to me personally when I saw the lineups, and I think Bradley is a great FPL option as well. We've got a lot of budget defenders in this wildcard setup, but of course you can change things to your liking, and we're going to have another budget option here who could double in Game Week 34. Both Planet FPL and Ben Crellin are in agreement about this double taking place in Game Week 34, and that's for Wolves and Bournemouth, and that's why I think Ait Nouri could be by far the best Wolves option, period, especially with Pedro Neto potentially out for the rest of the season. You've got Hwang Hee-chan currently injured, Cunha the same thing. I look at the defensive coverage, I think Ait Nouri is the most exciting. He's got the bonus points potential and the odd assist here and there. It's just his injury record that concerns me a little bit, and in general he hasn't been able to sustain a lot of consecutive starts in the Premier League due to these problems, but I do like Ait Nouri, and I think he's worth a punt on the wildcard, that's for sure. There's only one defender slot left, and I would recommend going for someone from Everton. I think Pickford's the best in isolation, but if you don't go for him in goal, then you can go for either Mikolenko, Tarkowski, or Branthwaite, who I'm going for at the moment, but you could certainly change some of this, and you might not like some of these defenders in the long term. Ait Nouri's got injury problems, of course. Gabriel's currently, he's going to be flagged very soon in FPL, but he was withdrawn from the Brazil squad. Connor Bradley and Gusto may be subject to rotation in the next couple of weeks or months, so that's certainly malleable and subject to change. But if all five of these can sustain a start, be injury free for the next couple of months, I think there could be great options in FPL. Despite blanking in Game Week 28, not featuring in Game Week 29, and facing Man City away in Game Week 30, I think Saka is a season-long hold if possible. The problem you're going to find when building your wildcard squad or when you're trying to build the optimal midfield and forward line is you have to make sacrifices. You can't go for Saka, Foden, Palmer, Salah, and also go for the likes of Haaland and Watkins up front. You have to make a sacrifice somewhere down the line, and you'll find out as we progress for the midfield and forward line which player will have to drop out. But for me, Phil Foden is a great option. There are two tough home games coming up for Manchester City, but they're still favourites in both of those matches. And after that, Man City's run is incredible. It would not surprise me if they won every single game between Game Week 32 until the end of the season. Now, of course, Tottenham away is going to be in there somewhere, probably in Game Week 37, and that's the only game where I could see Man City slipping up in the title run-in. But Phil Foden for me is an incredible option. This is undoubtedly his standout season. He's making a difference in the big games. So I think Phil Foden is a great FPL option for the first time in his Premier League career. The third midfielder is Cole Palmer. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think he's essential, and I rarely say this about a player, but for his price, being on penalties, the talismanic figure for his club, with 2 upcoming doubles from now until the end of the season and no blanks, it's just a no-brainer. Don't overcomplicate it. Go for Cole Palmer. I think it's a great option, even for the captaincy in Game Week 30. If you don't have Salah, and maybe if you're not really too keen on Son, I think Palmer is easily in the top 3 or 4 captains for Game Week 30, and I'll talk about this in my team selection video as well. There are 2 midfielder slots left. I will go for Heung-min Son, but it's worth noting that Spurs have poor fixtures from Game Week 34 until the end of the season. But from Game Week 30 until 33, I do like Spurs' fixtures, and he could do a really good job. Not to mention, even when the fixtures turn sour, Spurs will have doubles to compensate for that, so it's not the end of the world. And I think Heung-min Son is a great FPL option. There's no denying it. You can also go for James Maddison or Richarlison, but I think Heung-min Son takes the cake, and he's the best midfielder option from Tottenham Hotspur, and by some distance as well. The final midfielder is pretty obvious, isn't it? I think he's probably the best option in isolation from now until the end of the season, and that's going to be Mohamed Salah, who is second amongst midfielders, only behind Saka in terms of FPL points, and that's really because Salah missed a lot of games through injury and also his AFCON commitments back in January. This is the best midfield 5 you can build. Of course, if you want to upgrade your forward line and go for more expensive options there, you have to sacrifice one of these players. And if I had to pick one, it's probably between Son or Foden. Tricky to kind of separate those two, but maybe Son due to the fixtures that are coming up for Tottenham Hotspur. But if you can build this midfield 5, you won't regret it. You're going to get a lot of FPL points in the process, and you're going to shoot up the ranks very soon. Game Week 29 was a disaster for many of us, but if you went for Manice, as I discussed in the previous wildcard video for blank Game Week 29, then you will be laughing and you probably got a green arrow from it. So I think Manice is the best budget forward you can go for at this moment in time, and there's no debate about it whatsoever. There's always a bit of, concern. Broja's back. You've also got Jimenez returning from injury, but I really think Manice, in the form he's in, cannot be dropped, and he showed that to a T against Tottenham Hotspur with that brace. And in order to afford that midfield 5 and also go for some expensive players elsewhere, I think Manice is the perfect budget enabler. I'd even start him this week potentially, but it would mean benching one of the other options. That's a tricky decision to make, and that's what I'll talk about using FPL Team very shortly. But Manice for me is a great option for Game Week 30 and also until the end of the season, purely from a budget perspective. And on top of that, you could even start him and get some returns in the process. I think he's a perfect enabler, and I actually talked about him early in the season, and really it was just to sit on the bench, but nowadays he's really transformed into a viable FPL option for your starting 11. And the second forward I'm going for is Solanke, very likely to double in Game Week 34, good fixtures until Game Week 32. You could start to sell him in Game Week 35, but I think Solanke for the next 5 fixtures is definitely worth holding on to, especially if Bournemouth double and that's confirmed, and they would also be facing Wolves in the process. The final forward is going to be Erling Haaland. I think it's a very simple one. Man City's fixtures cannot be ignored. I'd go for at least one Man City attacker, preferably 2. So Foden and Haaland are by far the best. You've also got De Bruyne, who's probably going to do the best out of those 3 against Arsenal specifically. But in the long term, I know who I'd rather have. Haaland and Foden for consistent starts, returns, and also they've been keeping injury free for most of this season. There is a link to Drafthound in the description below of my YouTube video, on Spotify or any platform that you're watching this on, and they're recommending Leno and Neto as the goalkeepers, with Leno being in goal for the starting 11, Pedro Porro, Romero and Bradley as the back three, a midfield four of Son, Palmer, Havertz and Phil Foden, and a front three of Haaland, Watkins and Solanke. And yes, this is the first wildcard video I've made in months, probably ages, maybe for the first time this season, that I don't feature Ollie Watkins in my wildcard squad. I like him a lot for that fixture against Wolves in Gameweek 30, but after that, Aston Villa's fixtures are poor. They're right down there in the bottom in the FDR from Gameweek 31 until Gameweek 38, and there are no doubles that are yet to happen for Aston Villa. They're not going to double at all this season, and that's why I don't think Ollie Watkins is, I want to say worth it, but he's less desirable now than he was a couple of weeks ago. The bench also includes Saka, Richards and Gabriel, so it's a solid wildcard team by Drafthound, and I'll take some of this into account when making the final changes and building the definitive team for Gameweek 30 on the wildcard. So let's now head over to FPL.team and show you what I believe is the best wildcard squad for the rest of the season. I've made one change to build this definitive wildcard squad for Gameweek 30, and that's Petrovic coming in for Areola. And for Gameweek 30, I'm doubling up on Chelsea defensively with Petrovic and Gusto at home to Burnley. Bradley and Branthwaite complete the defensive line. I'm also going for Foden, Palmer, Son and Salah as the midfield four, and a front three of Muniz, Haaland and Solanke. And just like Drafthound, Saka is first on my bench, and that's something I could do for my own team selection. Even wildcarding is a distinct possibility for me this week, and I'm keeping my options open. I could wildcard in Gameweek 30, 31 or perhaps a bit later in the season, such as Gameweek 35. All of that will be discussed in future videos, but the bench for this wildcard team would include Neto, Saka, Nuri and Gabriel. The expected points is 58.7. I believe Son has slightly higher expected points, so if we change the captaincy to him, yes, it actually goes up by 0.1, but I have to say, for me personally, Salah is the best captaincy option this week. I'd probably put Son second and Palmer third, but that could certainly change from now until the deadline stream in a couple of weeks' time. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below about the best wildcard squad. If I were to change anything, I think in future videos for the updated version, I think the defense is the most likely to change. The midfield and forward line, though, is quite settled, and I do like that attacking 8, and I think it's also not going to lead to too many benching headaches in the future. I know Muniz is in incredible form, but more often than not, you would be benching him and starting Saka in most game weeks, but in Gameweek 30, I would favour the Fulham striker over Saka due to their ceiling and the nature of their opponents. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify. Check all the links in the description below, and also be sure to share my videos and podcasts around with those that you know. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links such as Drafthound, the FPL League, the Discord server, and much more, such as Amazon Music and Spotify. That'd be greatly appreciated as always. I wish you the best of luck for Gameweek 30 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.